Welcome to the Elaborate Topics podcast, where we focus on lab-specific strategies for medical laboratory professionals. We're proud to be the healthcare detectives that work behind the scenes to get the results needed to influence medical decisions. Let's grow together and jump right into the lab.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elaborate Topics. And we are your co-hosts, Lona Small, Stephanie Whitehead, and Tywauna Wilson. And today I'm so excited because we are going to talk a little bit more in depth to Tywauna Wilson so you can get to know her a little bit more. We've been with you for more than half a year, and we've talked and interviewed different guests, and we thought it would be special if we interview each other so you can get to know a little bit more about your co-host. And as you know, Elaborate Topics is our weekly lab podcast where we give you tips and tools to excel inside and outside the lab. So I'm really excited to have Tywauna on Hot Seat today. And so I'm going to go right into today's episode. So Tywauna, happy to have you. Tell the listeners about your lab journey and how did you get to where you are today?
Thank you, Lona. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to kind of be on the hot seat and in front of the scenes. But I started my laboratory journey over 15 years ago. I never thought I was going to go into the lab. I always thought I was going to go to dental school, actually. And so when I went to college, went to Kentucky State University, I had to choose a major, and of course I could have chosen biology or chemistry, but then I noticed they had this major called medical laboratory science, and at Kentucky State it was called clinical laboratory science. And I was like, oh, I looked into it, and my dean happened to be a medical laboratory scientist by background. And so I'm like, what is this profession? What is this all about? Because I didn't want a biology or chemistry degree. I'm always thinking, okay, what if this doesn't go according to plan? And so my dean at the time, he talked about all the cool things in the laboratory, what I could do in this industry. I didn't know anything about blood bank and serology and immunology, know anything about any of that. And so I looked into it and I said, I think this is for me. It gives me the opportunity to help people, and I don't have to be on the front lines. And so I embarked on the journey of going into the medical laboratory science program at Kentucky State. And it happened to be a hybrid program where I had to do my clinical training at another college. And so I completed my training at the University of Cincinnati and Cincinnati, Ohio. And I just fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with it. And quite frankly, I didn't even think twice about dental school and what could have been, because this industry opened my eyes up to so much. And when I was doing my clinicals, I'll never forget it. I was doing my clinicals at the VA Medical Center in Cincinnati, and one of my trainers, her name is Ann Schoonover, so if you are listening somewhere, just know that you absolutely changed my life. And what she told me during my clinical training is that if you get a degree in this field, you can do anything. Do not limit yourself to a hospital laboratory. She said you can go into industry, you can go into pharmaceutical, you can go work for the instrument vendors, you could do anything. You can go into sales. And if it wasn't for her telling me that, my eyes and thoughts would have just been medical, hospital lab, first, second, or third, the traditional route. And nothing is wrong with the traditional route, but because of her insight of having me think another way, I was like, with this, I could do anything. I could change the world. And while I was doing my clinicals at one of the hospital facilities, because I heard that information from Ann, I was very in tune with who's in the medical laboratory industry. And one of our hospital CEOs at the time was a medical laboratory scientist by background. So what did that do for me? That solidified that in this industry with a degree in medical lab science, I truly can do anything, because we had a CEO of a very successful hospital being a medical laboratory scientist by background. She actually came from the microbiology area of the lab. And so that was my journey into the laboratory. I got in, I did work in a reference lab starting off, third shift, high volume, and I've worked in a pediatric facility, I've worked in academia, I've worked in pharmaceutical. I've also had the opportunity to start an integrated mobile diagnostics program that integrated point-of-care laboratory with screening mammography. So I've always been in endeavors that allowed me to really feel like I'm impacting the world and changing the world. If you ask my mom early on, when I was a little girl, I've always said I wanted to change the world. I wanted to help others, and that's when I was little. I wanted to be a teacher back then, because I felt like that was the career that I needed to be able to make the impact, and I've been able to do that in this career. So that's been my journey through the laboratory, like I said, from bench technologist. Now I serve as a system technical director of chemistry and special chemistry toxicology for a regional laboratory in the Dayton, Ohio community, where I have 6 hospital locations, 2 freestanding emergency departments, and a core reference lab. So anything, all things chemistry is up under my purview, in regards to standardization, new test development, new test implementation, standard procedures across the system, being on the front lines when we have our CAP inspection, going to CAP inspections, working with a team of leaders across our system, and helping them continue to hone in on their leadership and technical skills. So that's what I've done in the laboratory, and of course, I've done a lot of things outside of the laboratory.
Amazing, Tywauna. A very powerful story, especially the impact that someone else can have on someone's life. Like what she said to you during your internship made such a difference to basically opening up your eyes to know that you have the potential to do whatever you choose to do with this degree. And I think that's kind of the gist of our podcast. Hopefully that someone could be listening and they may hear just maybe a tip or a tool or a word or an experience that will make a difference in the decisions that they make, knowing that they can do whatever they want to do with the knowledge that they have as medical technologists. I think that's really, really powerful. And you not only use that to propel yourself in the things that you're doing today, but you're actually giving back. You know, you use that to give back to others who probably were where you were then. So that's really impressive.
I agree with you, Lona. And Tywauna, you've had such an amazing journey. 15 years in this field is incredible. And all of the things you've been able to do in those 15 years is just really remarkable. The span that you've been able to cover, like you said, from pediatrics to academia, is just really exciting. And I'm sure it's been an exciting, insightful journey for you. So tell us and the listeners, what is your favorite lab memory since you've become a medical laboratory scientist?
Stephanie, that's a great question. I've had a lot of great memories, but I'll tell you the single most impactful and life-changing memory was in 2011 when I had the opportunity to go with ASCP and serve as a global consultant in Rwanda, Africa. I have been out of the country before, more so for personal travel, but I had never been out of the country more, and definitely not in Africa, to be able to help others change the way they think, change the way that they look at their professional outlook. And so in 2011, I, along with two other colleagues, went to Rwanda, Africa to train their laboratorians on clinical chemistry and laboratory safety so that they could go back to their respective labs to be able to combat HIV and AIDS in their country. And so what they did, it was part of the PEPFAR initiative through ASCP. And what they did is in Africa, they brought laboratorians from all over to Gisenyi, Rwanda, to be able to do this training. And so I was there for about 10 days, being able to just pour into them, being able to just, some of the things that we consider to be basic, how to use a pipette correctly, how to have proper documentation, how to be good laboratorians, and to be able to see their faces. So they would come to the training, and at the end of the training, they had to give a presentation of what they learned and what they would take back to their laboratories. And for me, I think I got more value out of it than they did. They taught me so much, just, accepting me into their culture, being able to listen to, what I had to offer. But it was a life-changing experience to travel for 22 hours on a flight, multiple flights, mind you. I left from Cincinnati to Paris, Paris to Kenya, Kenya to Rwanda. That was one way. A whole day time difference. But just to see the gratitude on their face, to be able to go into their hospital and see what kind of equipment that they worked with, to be able just to see them being excited to be laboratorians. So when I hear people say that, this industry is, it's not all that great, you don't get recognition, you can't make an impact. If you saw what I saw, you know the value of a laboratorian. You know what we do changes lives every single day. And to be able to see that in laboratorians and in a hospital it took me 22 hours to get there, it's priceless, because at that time they were really in the heavy HIV and AIDS and not knowing whether they were going to live or die. If you think about what we are going through right now with the pandemic and COVID-19, that is exactly what they were going through at that particular time. So to be able to train a generation of leaders to continue on to be able to be great in their laboratory, hands down, is the most favorite lab memory. But seeing a lot of my colleagues kind of move up in the lab industry is something else that makes me kind of chuckle and makes me excited. I can remember having one of my laboratorians, I'd hired her right out of school, and it's funny to go full circle. And I can remember her coming into the lab for an interview, and she wasn't really prepared. She just came into the lab, and it's funny that I was like, I'm going to give the young lady a chance. We need workers, and she has the skill set. She wasn't really all that polished, and she got in. She did a great job. She learned the job, and here I have seen her years later to move into leadership, develop. And now she has moved into management herself. So it's just a blessing to be able to have the memories with some of my colleagues, and I've worked with a lot of colleagues over the years, but to be able to see some of the rising stars move up and grow has been great memories for me of being a scientist.
Wow, awesome. I know, you're talking a lot. It seems as if it's really inspire you to see people grow and not just stay stagnant. Growth could be in different direction, whether it's moving into management. Of course, we are all leaders, and you may not have a specific role as a supervisor or a manager. However, for us in the lab, there are certain tools that you need in order to get to those places. So what are some of maybe, say, 2 or 3 leadership or even technical nuggets that you would give to a new lab manager?
I would definitely say that's a great question. I've learned so much, some trial by fire, starting out in the industry, but I would definitely say ask a bunch of questions. Don't assume somebody knows anything. So as a new manager, I would ask questions. So one of the things that helped me when I was first in my leadership role as a new manager is I took the time to meet every single staff member and learn about them. Leadership is about relationships. It is about building that rapport. It is about trust, quite frankly. If your team doesn't trust you, they are not going to open up to you. So you have to make the time and take the time to know your team. And I found that that was valuable, especially when transitioning to a new team. So if I was the outsider and I came in, taking that time to ask the questions, what has worked around here? If you were me, what would you focus on first? So as a new manager, make sure you ask plenty of questions and not just give your insight. You want to ask first, seek to understand, and I guarantee you people will tell you what you need to know if you ask the right questions and you listen. I would also say, as a new manager, commit to learning something new all the time. So if there are skills that you are very good at, so sometimes when we transition from the bench into leadership or management, we really rely heavily on our technical expertise. And you need that, absolutely. But when you move into the people part of business, the skill set that you need is different. And so when I say learn something new, if you're great in blood bank, that's great. Keep your skills sharp. However, if you are a blood bank manager, now you need to focus on the business of people, right? You need to focus on how can I develop my team. You need to focus on active listening. You need to focus on emotional intelligence. You need to focus on being seen and being visible. Sometimes managers, they get into the role and they stay in their office. And it's very difficult to be a good manager and you don't know your people and you're stuck in the office. And then I would say a technical tidbit that I would give to a new manager, especially in today's time when organizations are doing a lot of, as I call it, becoming a system. So you used to have a lot of organizations that was just, we have our one hospital. Now you have it where it's a system. You got 3 or 4 hospitals that have been bought up, and now it's part of one. And I would say get buy-in early and get your advocates early. What do I mean by that? So I'm over chemistry as my discipline at the laboratory here in Dayton, Ohio. And when I came in, I replaced a leader who had been in this role for 30 years. Our leadership styles are very different. That person knew it all, did it all, and didn't really empower the team. Well, after they retired, I came in, the position was vacant, I came in, and the team was used to that way. They was used to that person making all of the decisions. And I really needed the team to help us move forward because we had so many projects we had to do. We had a new system implementation of new equipment. So when we first started, we had 3 different chemistry platforms. We had Siemens. We had 2 versions of Siemens platforms. We had our Roche system, and we decided as a system we were going to Roche being our vendor for all of our laboratories, and getting everybody on board and bought into the vision. So you have to be able to know your technical expertise, but you also got to know how to convey that so that you're bringing others into the decision making. And so that comes with influence. You got to be able to get people where you're not saying that your way is not the right way or the way you were doing it is wrong. You want people to be able to contribute their ideas. So can you imagine 3 different platforms? We had front-end automation at full front-end automation at one site, partial front-end automation at another site, and no automation at several sites. And we were to move forward with one instrument vendor, the same procedures, the staff doing the same thing at every location. And it was difficult. Not impossible, but it was difficult. And as a new leader, getting that buy-in, getting those advocates from every site is important for your success. So if you are a manager and you have technical oversight as well, I would absolutely say that you need to make sure that you are knowledgeable of what it is that you're trying to do, whether it is system standardization with equipment or procedures or a new computer information system implementation, and get your buy-in from your respective locations. So you got to know your people. So those would be just 3 practical nuggets that I would give to a new leader. Ask questions, and let's not forget the power of delegation. You can't do it all. You cannot do it all. You need help, and you have to be able to ask for help and be able to delegate and follow up.
That is so true, and I think we've all experienced all of that. And like you said, the power of delegation, continuing learning, those are things that will really help anybody who's transitioning from the bench into a management role. So you're right on point. Thank you so much for bringing all those points together. Over your span in your journey as a medical laboratory scientist, it's clear that you've had a lot of success and that you've been able to do many things that have positively impacted probably not just your community but our profession. So along the way, anybody in any career has many successes, but they also have a lot of failure. So can you tell us what has success taught you, but also what have some of your failures taught you?
Wow, that's a great question, Stephanie. You just on a roll here today with these questions. So success is what you think it is for your life. So what I've learned is that there's no magic bullet. It's not like you got to get to a certain position, you got to be the director or CEO or whatever it is. But success is what you think it is for your life. And I think it's very important for you to identify what it looks like for you. And if you don't, you can get frustrated because then you could be chasing somebody else's vision or dream for you. So that could be graduating from high school or even going to college. I was a first-generation college student and college graduate. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. So graduating from high school was success. You know, for me, it taught me that if I put my mind towards a goal or my dreams, and really put effort into it and believe in my heart and commit to it, and I understood that it was possible. I could do anything. You know, it also taught me that being successful allows me to help more people. So that's why I do as much as I do, because I'm able to help and touch more people. When you are successful, you have access, you have influence, and you have the opportunity to bring more people on the journey and to the table with you. So when I see other people I might have helped along the way achieve their dreams, to me that's success. I'm definitely committed to building a legacy of leaders. So whenever I check out of here, that is one thing that I want people to be able to say is that she did help other people. She wasn't selfish. She wasn't all about herself, but she was committed to helping others. And because of her leadership or her nuggets or her mentoring or this or that, I was able to do more. Now, that's what success taught me. Now, failure has taught me a lot of things, too. Failure keeps you humble, and it's part of the process. But it taught me to never give up and keep trying new things. So those of you who have ever read any of my stories, if you've heard me say, you will know that starting out on this medical laboratory journey was almost, as I say, like a first-run sitcom. It was almost canceled before it even got started. And so failure taught me. So when I started out on this journey, as we all know, you have to pass your certification test. And I couldn't pass it. I could not pass that thing. I studied, and I just couldn't pass it. And at the time, you would pay for the test, and at the time it was $150. You would pay for the test, and then you would wait until the block of time that it's open. So I paid for my test in June, for example. I couldn't even sit for the test until October, and I had from October to December was the block. And so I remember working in my field. I had already had a job. I was working on third shift, and I went to take my test, graduated, finished school in July, couldn't take the test until October, went into the testing center, and I wasn't feeling that great about it anyway because a bunch of time had lapsed and my focus was learning my job. And I took the test and got on there, click the screen, fail. Okay. So went back into it. I had to pay another $150 and had to wait another 3 months before I could even sit for the test again. Went into it on time 2, no difference. I studied. I can't say that I committed 100% to it, which was obvious in my results, and I still didn't pass. And so by that time, my back was really up against the wall. I didn't even know if I was going to be a scientist at that point. And I was working. By that time, my employer was like, if you can't pass this test, we're going to have to let you go. And I could see my dreams of having a degree, going to school, being a medical laboratory scientist. I could see those flash beyond my very eyes that this is getting ready to come to a close just as soon as it got started. And so I had a colleague. He was an older gentleman. His daughter was in medical school at the time. And he said, this next time you take the test will be the time. And he said, whatever you need me to do. He brought me her medical school books. And he said, you're going to pass this test. He said, I don't want you to get discouraged. Because I was discouraged. People at work are laughing. I felt humiliated. And I felt like, can I do this? And he said, keep trying, keep studying. He brought me so many medical school books. I thought I was going to medical school much longer being a tech. And I would record myself studying and talking it through. And when I went in there that third time, I had a peace about myself. It was like, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I went in there, and that time it said pass. Interestingly enough, every time I scored very high in blood bank without studying. And interestingly enough, I've been not in blood bank most of the time that I have been working. But what that taught me is to never, never, never give up. It taught me that you have the power to change the narrative. It taught me that it doesn't matter how you start, but how you finish. So you can't tell me today that, a person that couldn't pass their certification test, the laughs, the humiliation at work, to here we are today. And where I started is my first job where people were laughing and making me feel like I was less than and not smart. I am at the exact same employer today, serving as the assistant medical director, first African-American they've ever had in this role. And I have all of those hospitals, all of those teammates in which I am leading and advising. So you can't tell me that if you really, truly believe you're going to impact the world, you're going to change the world, you are. And so I didn't let that define me because I could have. And so those of you who are out there listening, who may have had failure, maybe you didn't pass the test. But just because you don't pass the test does not mean you can't pass the course. And I think about that course as a course of life. And so, when people talk to me about failures, and as you know, we interview people on this show all the time, and I have some other podcasts, and I interview people, I always ask about the failures. Because if you can't tell me a time where you failed at something, then maybe you've not tried enough things. And it makes me kind of question, because all of the greats have failed at something. If you look at any of them, Albert Einstein, Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, for those of you that are in that, Steve Jobs. I mean, you look at any of them, they have all failed at something. And so it's important for those of us who are leaders, who are working with the next generation, who are working with our children, to make sure that they know about some of these stories. I work with teens and youth all the time. And when we as leaders are not being authentic with them, we are giving them a false sense of impression, because those teens could look at me and just say, oh, you've always been successful. And that's not true. And I make sure I tell them that, because if you are in the high schools like I'm in the high schools, you know that suicide is at an all-time high. And that's because our kids are afraid to fail. And so that's what failure taught me. It taught me to share my story with the world. It taught me to be a voice to those who did fail and gave up. So that's what it taught me.
Awesome. The good thing about failure is that we can learn from them, because so many times when people fail, they get frustrated and despondent, and you were able to learn from them. And sometimes it takes some time after the failure to look back and see the lesson that we learned. But to be able to use your lessons in failure to teach others is really powerful. So then I know for you, you have done a lot of growth, a lot of training in terms of professional and personal growth. So what do you do to get to where you are today, where you can look back at your failures or even some of your experiences? What do you do for personal and professional growth?
I have subscribed to lifelong learning. As long as I'm living, I know I need to keep learning and growing, because things change. And so what I learned in school may or may not be applicable today. I think it's important for me to keep learning and sharpening my skills in order to be able to pour and mentor into other people. And so for my own personal and professional growth, I am an avid reader. I have always been a reader. I can remember being in elementary school in the library having book contests over the summer. Whoever can read the most books and get stamps, you would get a prize. So it was nothing for me to read 50 books over the summer. That was just, I've always been just an avid reader. So some of the books that I would recommend today is Developing the Leader Within You 2.0 and The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, both by John Maxwell. Those are like foundational books that will help you be a better leader, and it will also help you be better with your own personal growth. In the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, there's one law in there, and it's called the law of the rubber band. And that one I value, and it keeps me stretched. And what that law says is that nothing grows in the comfort zone. So if you take a rubber band, if you had a rubber band and you think about its purpose is to stretch. So a rubber band is meant to be stretched. If you think about you and your life and your growth, because we know growth is intentional. You don't just wake up like, I grew today, like I just learned something today. You have to actively and intentionally grow every single day. And what that law teaches me is that get comfortable, I've stayed too long. So I don't know if our listeners have ever heard the old adage that if you look around in the room and you are the smartest person in the room, it's time for you to move on, because that means you're not learning anything in that room if you're the smartest person there. And so I think of that law of the rubber band, I think of continuously stretching myself, continuously learning new things. So I am actually in a training program right now. I don't tell people to do stuff that I don't do. So I'm in a speakers training program. I've taken speaking classes before and training programs before, but it's always nice to get a different feel from different trainers. And so I'm taking a 6-week training program. I am able to connect with other leaders, other speakers, other entrepreneurs, and it's interesting. Our host or trainer, facilitator, she had us doing an assignment before the program even started, and she said, here are all the members of this particular training program. I challenge you to connect with on the phone, not text message, not sending a social media direct message, but I challenge you to connect with at least 3 people in this training group and learn something about them and see what you have in common. And it's interesting, something so basic, that how many times we don't pick up the phone. And what that taught me that, even though technology is great, it's easy to become disconnected. And that was a lesson that I learned before the program even started. I'm also in a mastermind group with other leaders across the United States. We're all in different parts, Texas, Louisiana, Maryland. And so what we are learning is Put Your Dreams to the Test. We're covering that book on Put Your Dreams to the Test by John Maxwell. So we have developed a group within ourselves, and each of us will teach on a particular lesson. So mine was about tenacity. Do you have the tenacity to make your dreams come true? And it's easy to say you have a dream. It's easy to say that you're going to go for it. But do you have the stamina? Are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to go the distance to make your dream come true? So I participate in mastermind classes. I'm always going to workshops. And I like workshops in which it's not just the speakers speak and then you kind of interact in the chat. I like to be able to ask the speaker questions. I want to learn from them. I want to be able to network with other people, because that's the way you shorten your learning curve, grow your network, and meet new people. I listen to tons of audiobooks. So if you like audiobooks, I subscribe to the app Scribe. It's $8 a month, and you can download articles. You can download audiobooks. So I have Think and Grow Rich. I usually go through that book every year. It's a great book on mindset. I participated in a class not too long ago where we talked about this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And the instructor said, read the chapter on persistence. Read it every day for 14 days. And if you stop, then you have to start all over. And he said, if you can't get through reading that chapter every day for 14 days, you have to evaluate, your persistence, because it not only shows up in you reading this chapter, it shows up in other aspects of your life. And so I think it's important to continue to grow yourself. I'm always looking I'm a technology buff, so I like to look at new technology, what's out there. It has nothing to do with lab. And that would be something I would tell the listeners, is that don't isolate yourself to just lab technical expertise. Learn other stuff. that allows you to meet other people and be visible. If you haven't checked out our podcast, the episode about being visible, this is exactly it. Go back and take a listen to that particular podcast where you want to be able to just learn and grow from other people. So I'm always on social media figuring out what are people talking about. What can I learn next? So I have a business, so I like to hear information about how to make my business run more smoothly, how to profit first out of my business, how to outsource. And I've been able to use a lot of those things right in the laboratory, right in my role as a technical director. Being able to outsource is very similar on being able to delegate. So that's what I would tell somebody. Get into reading. If you don't have time to read, listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts. Get yourself in networks or in groups in which you can add value and add your expertise. The world needs to hear what you have to offer.
Thank you, Tywauna. Well, and I know that just from knowing you that you've been able to also be very innovative outside of the laboratory, in addition to all the things you've done within the laboratory realm, by getting into media space with your books and your podcasting, and you're also the founder and CEO of Trendy Elite Coaching and Consulting. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business outside of the laboratory, and how did you get started in the media space?
Thanks, Stephanie, for asking that. Yeah, so in 2017, I actually launched and founded my leadership training and coaching business. And so I began speaking, coaching, and training and exposing others to leadership skills. And the reason I started that business is the whole focusing on the next generation of leaders. We know and understand that within most organizations, the real influencers are middle management and the frontline team. And I got tired of seeing people getting passed over for opportunities because they weren't prepared. We would have positions that would open up in our labs, but we hadn't had trained staff that was ready to move up, and the industry is able to see that now with people retiring at a rapid rate. In the next 5 years or so, we're going to have a severe shortage with leadership members. And I got into that space because I wanted to be able to offer the people that I work with, my clients, practical tips that they could use to benefit and stand out in their personal and professional life. And so that's what Trendy Elite is all about. It is about giving you that opportunity to grow your leadership, to boost and enhance your visibility, and help you uncover and unleash your unique power strengths so that you can be the standout leader in your industry. We do this through our master classes. We do it through our coaching programs, our accountability partnerships, because sometimes you just need somebody to help you be accountable. We have our workshops, and we have our monthly leader roundtables, so I'm excited about that. Our monthly leader roundtables where we'll have speakers, but we'll also have that chance for you to do some virtual networking. I know people are kind of tired of the whole Zoom and WebEx and all of that, so we have an innovative platform that we use that actually allows you to ask questions to of the speaker who's presenting, to be able to do speed networking where you can network with scientists all over. You don't even know who may pop up on your screen. So that gives you an opportunity to be visible. Our coaching programs and our signature Standout Leader Academy, where we cover 4 key principles that help you move from ordinary to extraordinary leadership. And for the lab folks out there that know all about CLIA, you know that CLIA is the rule maker. And so it's the same in our leadership. You have to be able to communicate, you have to be able to lead, you have to be able to influence, and you have to be able to assess. And so those are things that we cover in the Trendy Elite programs. For more information on that, you can go to the website, TrendyEliteLLC.com. And one other thing that I want to mention about Trendy Elite that I'm very excited about is that this year, so this was something awesome that happened this year, we have been approved to be a sponsor for PACE, which is through ASCLS, and through SHRM for our HR professionals, a provider for continuing education programs. So if you have to renew your certification, our leadership programs will account for PACE credits. If you're an HR professional and you need to renew your SHRM credential, we have programs that you're able to get SHRM credit for that as well. So I am excited that ASCLS recognized us as an industry leader and being able to give you leadership programs. And so this is not your typical, you plug in, you do a self-study course. Those are great. It's a time and place for everything. However, we know at Trinity Elite, what's important is that you're able to interact with professionals and ask them questions real time that is able to help you lessen your learning curve. So that's about Trinity Elite. I'm very excited. But getting into the media space, I actually got into that space in 2017 with my first contributing author book, Dear Fear, Volume 2. It was 18 powerful lessons of living your best life on the other side of fear. And that was my opportunity to share my story, share how I grew up. I grew up in a single-parent household, and I talk about it doesn't matter how you start, but how you finish, and how some of my heroes, my mom, my dad, my grandmother, my aunt, were unlikely experts. None of them went to college. None of them graduated from high school, but they were my experts. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be who I am today. And so getting started with books, because what I've learned from working with our youth and young leaders is that leadership is not always a fun, sexy topic. Even with the people that's in the lab, it's not one of those that's like, ooh, this is the next scandal. I'm so excited to learn more about leadership. And so I wanted to think of innovative ways to get the leadership, communication, the importance of that out there. And so I started that in the first book. And then in 2019, my husband and I actually launched our radio network, Direct Impact Broadcasting, where the first podcast on that network was Leadership Tidbits with Coach T. Wilson. And in that show, I got to interview all kind of leaders. The whole goal was to interview diverse leaders from all around the world and expose people to them. So I interviewed principals. I interviewed business leaders. I interviewed laboratorians. I interviewed senators. You name it, I interview people because I think that it's important to have an exposure to all kind of leaders in all different industries. And I just was able to keep building on that. And so we had additional shows on the network. So you all listening to the Elaborate Topic Show is a show that's on the network. We're always looking for new shows. So if you have an expertise, we would love to have you as part of the network and share your knowledge and give exposure. In this whole lab business, the only way for other people to know about the lab, know about what we do, is for champions like ourselves to get out and talk about it. And so that's why I got into the space with the podcast. And then I figured along the way, let me bring some other people with me and expose them as well. So I started the Leadership Tidbits book program, which I've been able to bring 20 other authors, leaders at the time who were not previously published authors, to allow them to share their leadership nuggets. So again, just thinking of ways to get information out there in a variety of ways to benefit those who are coming behind, those who are listening to our message, so through books and podcasting. And when I work with our young people, when I start sharing this stuff, they are just so intrigued by it all. But, being a published author, this year alone, I helped 4 other people with their book projects of being able to see those to fruition. And so one of the guys talked about how to be a head coach. I had a collaboration of women. It talked about surviving the pandemic and what they have learned from it. So just being able to help others be able to share their gift of leadership with the world. So the media space, I love it. Is able to be able to just be a champion and get the word out there without the traditional fluff.
Fantastic. So I know we're approaching close to an hour. Lona, did you have any additional questions for Tywauna or anything else you wanted to embark on the conversation?
Maybe just, outside of the Elaborate Topic podcast, how can our listeners learn more about you and stay connected with you, Tywauna?
Thanks, Lona. So listeners can stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Tywauna Wilson. I would love to connect with you there. You can also go to my website, Some Leaders Wear Lab Coats, www.someleaderswearlabcoats.com. on all the social media channels as Coach T. Wilson on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, CoachTeeWilson. So I would love for people to connect with me on the social media channels. I do have a private Facebook group where I offer practical tips that you can use in both the laboratory and in your personal life. So would love to connect with the listeners via one of those platforms.
Well, thank you, Tywauna, and thank you to our listening audience for tuning into today's show where we went behind the scenes with Tywauna and talked about her laboratory journey, where she's come and where she is today, and we know that we will continue to see great things from her expertise and her positive impact on the laboratory community. If you like what you heard today and want to listen to our previous shows, please subscribe to Elaborate Topics podcast at directimpactbroadcasting.com. Remember to email us at elaboratetopics@directimpactbroadcasting.com to learn more about this topic or just to tell us other things that you want to listen to. We recently put out a blast on some social media sites imploring for guests who want to be on the show or just for you guys to share with us the different topics that you want us to talk about or what you want to hear from us. Be sure to follow myself, Tywauna, and Lona on any of our social medias, and tune in next week to hear another amazing episode of Elaborate Topics. And until then, have an amazing day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Elaborate Topics, where your hosts discussed relevant strategies for laboratory professionals. Please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and listen to us on directimpactbroadcasting.com. Stay tuned for another episode with information you can use to excel in your laboratory career.